Here we go. Okay, so we have a great panel now on the topic of increasing total reach into relevant audiences. I've got a great panel of guests here, so I'd like everyone to welcome them to the stage. You can sit anywhere you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to introduce our panelists, we have from right to left, we have Rich Brant, who's the Director of Advanced TV UK and International at Vivo. We have John Manning, the Client Investment Director at Starcom, mysteriously enigmatic in his photo. We have Mara Negri, who's the VP Marketing and Business Development at Publi Europe. We have Lisette Preston-Barnes, who is Business Development Director, EMEA at TiVo. And then finally, we have Ahmed Swidan, Director of Personalized TV Solutions at ATEM. So, thanks for joining us in this fantastic panel to round off the first day of the event. So, first I want to get into it in terms of the kind of concept of total reach. What we found is that, and we've had a lot of talk about AVOD and FAST at this event, and what do they mean to the total TV market. But first, and this is a question we get asked quite a bit, is what is the definition of AVOD? What does it include? What doesn't include? And how do advertisers define the space? Is it the same as how the supply side defines it? And what about the role of premium broadcaster content in this space? And I think that's a really good question to open up to Mara. I know you've got some thoughts on this, so.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of definition, I think AVOD is any video on demand supported by advertising, means it's a content free for viewers to watch, and is opposite to what we call SVOD, that is a subscription model. We also have hybrid model when you pay a fee to watch the content, but you also have some advertising on it. AVOD can be everything on demand, so no matter which is the platform, can be an OTT, can be an HBB TV service on top of the linear channel of broadcasters. And I think it's important also to say we have a definition of BVOD, that is broadcaster video on demand, that is actually, can be AVOD, can be SVOD, but it's the quality of the content behind that is changing, because you have a broadcaster that is producing top content quality in a brand safe environment. So I think on top of the different platform, we also should have a look on the type of content we are watching.
Okay, and in terms of like different platforms, so Rich, I know Vivo has a presence across numerous platforms, what some might consider premium, what some might consider non-premium. How do you view it at Vivo? What's the kind of your definition?
I mean, there's two ways to view AVOD as an environment, and one is from the viewer. The viewer wants to watch anything at any time, and it's got advertising in front of it, then that is technically AVOD. But then there's the way from an advertising community, how we want to view that. And ultimately, if you want to, you need to have some clarity about what is acceptable to be around, what kind of makes, that environment premium, or, for that part of the journey in terms of advertising. So I think there is standards, which was mentioned there, that ultimately the kind of advertising community needs to uphold and, live by the legacy that, some of those broadcast AVOD opportunities have kind of set before us. Because if we go down the road of just a pool of video out there, then there's advertisers are going to be around some questionable stuff. But if we have some nuance to it and understand what's premium, make some definitions as an industry, then suddenly there is still a big pool of inventory to kind of work with that has that kind of broadcast standards and editorial production values that kind of goes around it as well. So there's kind of two ways of looking at it.
Okay, so that's the kind of the VOD side of things. And now if you turn to kind of like the linear context and the linear environment, what about FAST? How's that space developing? Is it as big as the hype that's surrounding it? Especially in the UK and Europe, I know it's a massive thing in the US where it's being driven by cord cutting. Not quite the same dynamic over here. Is it getting close to closing the gap on reduced linear TV broadcast consumption?
So I'd say yes, it is small but growing, definitely. I mean, from our point of view, we've seen kind of 50% growth year on year in terms of kind of that first quarter this year. But ultimately, is it going to cover, the kind of gap between the two? On its own, if we just consider those channels, potentially not. And one thing to make clear is that linear is still linear and fast sort of thing. There's not kind of that kind of definition that we've got to kind of get our heads around as well. But I think it depends on your definition of that kind of environment as well. What is TV? Because there's plenty of actual connected TV opportunity out there with quality content and so on like that could make up the gap. And ultimately, I feel John would probably have an opinion on where we are and whether it does cover that at the moment. I'd say ultimately, probably if we just consider connected TV as apps and fast at the moment in the UK, then probably not. But if we consider the fact that, say, broadcasters are part of connected TV and YouTube, if you've got that kind of rigor around the quality of content, then actually there's a load of opportunity there.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, John, I'm sure you've got some thoughts. So just to kind of take it a bit further, who exactly are we reaching on these new kind of FAST and AVOD platforms? Is it a case of reaching existing TV viewers in new places, or is it about reaching consumers that are no longer watching linear TV?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, FAST, I think, for example, in the UK at the moment, it's still very, very early. But the launch of ITVX, I think, is going to bring FAST to the mainstream. And that is really going to change the behaviour. I think in the AVOD space and the SVOD space, for that matter, we've been sort of subject to snowblindness with the amount of content that's available, that it's hard to bring everybody in, and you just default to watching Friends or Big Bang Theory or something like that. Whilst FAST curates that content into one easy, accessible place, which should hopefully bring audiences in that wouldn't ordinarily find content as easily as they would on a BVOD or AVOD platform. So I think what it's going to do is we've seen obviously the younger end of the spectrum dive right into all of those connected TV offerings. I think what FAST will enable is some of the older demographics that might be the traditional heavy TV viewers potentially come across and get involved in those FAST channels. Now, we don't necessarily have an issue reaching those audiences anyway in linear, but obviously if you can target them in an online fashion, then you can start to think about how you can potentially frequency manage that and be a bit smarter with how you deploy that.
Yeah. Also, just to add to that as well, I think in terms of buying that environment, it's not to kind of make sweeping assumptions about that audience as well, because I think for a long time there was just an assumption that because you're accessing in this way, you're suddenly a younger audience because you're accessing it in this way. There is probably a demographic shift because of the way it's done, but ultimately there's some platforms that their content is back catalogue, and then there are some environments where the audience is going to be younger because of the content there. So it kind of feels like there is still that element of old school marketing of picking the channels according to who you're trying to reach.
Yeah. So
and interest as well,
Yeah.
If for example you're Sainsbury's and there's a cookery channel, there's a lovely tie-in there, so there's ways in which you can align your brand and the content on those channels as well.
Okay. And as you kind of see those audience not fragment but watching and viewing across these disparate platforms, how are agencies like Starcom managing these disparate platforms and audiences? How are you making it easier for your clients to access these new types of content and services and their audiences all in one place?
Well, it's difficult without unified measurement.
Yeah.
And I think we'd probably all agree that is the biggest challenge at the moment. But we have proprietary ways of doing that. At Publicis, we have the Core ID, which is an Epsilon-powered product, which helps bridge that gap for us. So it basically follows the user around from a household level, so we can then target them on different devices and make sure that we manage the reach and frequency with them in different places. So from a Publicis perspective, that's how we're doing it. From an industry perspective, where they might not have the luxury of other ways where they can follow the audience around, it is a big problem, and all you can do at the moment really from an industry agreed way is look at touch points as a way of doing it, but it's not ideal, and that's why we are crying out for, an industry agreed way of doing it, perhaps an origin, perhaps something else.
Yeah. So that's from the kind of industry side. So that's one kind of way of looking at it, how there's kind of like disparate platforms and different ways of accessing content and viewing. What about from the consumer side? Lisette, I know you have some thoughts on this. How do we reduce the friction, not just for advertisers between those different platforms and new kind of context for video content, but also for the consumers viewing that, and how is that done at a kind of like a consumer level?
Thank you for asking that question, because I think we're all in this room and it's all about the end user and their experience. And as you know, TiVo's been in the content discovery space for quite some time, because we believe that our mission is to basically bring a personalized content experience for TV fans. And if you're not doing that at the core of your business, then you will have fragmented audiences. A lot of the research that we've done shows that these audiences that are consuming FAST or consuming BVOD or consuming AVOD, they're also consuming linear in great quantities. Linear isn't dead. I know we're all talking about programmatic, but at the end of the day, these are very fluid audiences that are trying to find their content. And actually we have a use case in America. We have a product called TiVo Extend, where we use our linear set-top box data, the DVR data, and it's 100% deterministic, it's nationally representative. We use it from an exposed and unexposed use case, and we've actually used CTV inventory, premium inventory, to drive linear viewing. And we've done that with CBS, we've done that with live sports, and we've proven that these audiences that are lost and looking for different types of programming on different platforms and different apps, they can find the shows that they love even on a linear platform by using CTV. So it's quite complicated, but at the end of the day, it's about making sure that people find the content they want to watch.
And just from a publisher point of view as well, obviously from Vivo, we are agnostic. We don't have our own platform. We use lots of different platforms to do so, and ultimately our goal is to be where the viewer is, and at their call, rather than us, telling them how to watch our videos. They decide how to watch our videos, and that's ultimately why Vivo takes the stance of a publisher that distributes, and we use elephant in the room. YouTube is one of those ones, but ultimately for us it's the same content, same if we're on a TV screen, which ultimately YouTube has leaned to in terms of viewing behaviour, it's still a full screen ad, it's still the same content, and you'll see other publishers starting to do that, such as Channel 4 for example.
Yeah, and that's why we include YouTube CTV in our CTV forecasts.
Maybe if I can add a comment on this, I agree on the fact that user doesn't care about the platform. They're looking for content and great content. A way also for broadcasters to make easy the transition between linear and on-demand is on the HBB TV part of it, because you can be on a linear channel and then with the red button access to the on-demand part of it. You have it available in many markets like Italy, Germany, and Spain. So I think there are bridges between the classic linear view and the on-demand world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've mentioned it from the advertiser perspective and also from the consumer's perspective, but what about the tech perspective? I want to get Ahmed's thoughts on this. So what are the technological hurdles that need to be overcome when we're looking at linking these different worlds of premium video content? And how does this reflect in the video delivery system between FAST, AVOD, and linear?
So this is obviously a very big question, because we live in a world of fragmentation today, and the destinations are getting too many. So if you think about it from a content provider perspective, they have their linear channels that they've been distributing on terrestrial and satellite for many years. Perhaps they have their own OTT outlet, and they're also giving the streams to service providers, whether these are local or international. Add to that FAST and AVOD that is coming to the picture now, and add to that also HBB TV and ATSC 3.0 in the US. So that's a very complicated and fragmented environment. The question for content and service providers to ask is my addressable ad insertion system able to cover all of that with accuracy, with scalability, and with the features that I really need? ad insertion or addressable TV gets very complicated very quickly when you mix vendors and you mix technologies together. There are ad markers that need to speak the same language. There is different streaming formats. There is the different devices that we're streaming on, and the ads need to work properly on all of that. So that's really the challenge, or the right question for the content providers to ask. Now, if you add to that what's happening now with the digital ad insertion, let's say, revolution that we're living, is that the heritage of the linear is coming into the picture now. So we all ask ourselves the question, where are the budgets going to come from? Is it coming from linear, or is it coming from digital? In my opinion, we're not satisfying both conditions at the moment, because if it needs to come from linear, then you need to make the linear guys happy. If you want it to come from digital, you need to make the digital guys happy. Things from linear that we should be inheriting and we're not today are things like keeping the first spot in the ad break, things like the latency that we're used to in linear, things like the ad break position, so the first ad or the second ad or the third ad in the ad break that advertisers in the linear world are used to, which will need to be carried on with us to the FAST and AVOD world. So those are really the questions to be asked.
Certainly. And you mentioned fragmentation there, and also the fragmentation across devices. How important is it to be across all of those devices? Lisette, I know you have some thoughts on and some examples to give about TiVo's operations in the CTV space.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of touched on that subject today, that broadcasters are trying to find other ways to bring their content to end users, to consumers, to consume, and they're trying to find other platforms. We recognize that. We also know that since we've been innovating in the content discovery space, we brought natural language understanding for voice search, that it would be ideal to bring some of those best practices from our company's innovation and technology to the CTV space and to the connected and smart TVs. LG, Samsung, they've all cornered it. They've got deep pockets. There's a lot of tier 2s and tier 3 smart TV manufacturers and ODMs out there that need help from companies like ourselves to provide a all bells and whistles singing operating system. So we'll be in market here in Europe come the spring with some devices in market, and we did a partnership with Vestel, and we're excited to be both all in the UK, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and we will be announcing another partnership with a new ODM at CES. So we'll be knee-deep in some of these CTV discussions next year. So we're very excited about that. But yeah, we believe it's really imperative that content discovery and that the end user finds the content that they love. So we're making our foray into that platform. So
fantastic. Yes, so we've talked about AVOD, we've talked about FAST, those kind of incremental media. But let's kind of bring it back to the kind of what we see as the biggest part of the market still, the kind of linear TV portion, and particularly addressable TV and how that relates to reach and also frequency and measurement, which has been a key theme of the day, as it has been for the past few years, to be honest. But I'm going to do something slightly dangerous now in terms of time. I'm going to go through across the panel and ask you how you actually define addressable TV, because depending on who you ask and where in the world you are and which companies you talk to, you'll get a very different kind of answer. So really interested to see kind of how that differs across this kind of group of representatives we have. We'll start with Rich.
Well, I think ultimately it's any high quality production value TV that can be addressed at a specific audience. And there is a sliding scale though. So ultimately there can be login data absolutely there, but there can also be demographic data which you wouldn't be able to kind of hone in specifically on from a broadcast perspective.
Okay. Yeah, I echo what Rich was saying basically. Yeah, I mean it's any TV that can be overlaid with an addressable. Sorry, addressable. I shouldn't be using that word if I'm trying to define it. But any linear TV that can be overlaid with an ad that is inserted.
Yeah, for me it's the same. So for me it's a one-to-one message, means an ad served to a specific audience using data. Can be video, can be display. We have the L-shape banners available, and can be, of course, dynamic ad insertion, replacing a linear spot with something addressed.
Lisette?
I feel like I'm just repeating. Essentially, a data-driven ad marketing campaign that serves ads to specific audiences and to deliver a specific type of results that can be measurable, so targeted and measurable. That's addressable.
I think everything was said already. I'll just add that if you're trying to define addressable TV and you find yourself having to define 20 other things, then I would say you're on the right track.
On the right track.
One more thing I would add that we didn't cover, I think it should be seamless as well from a consumer point of view. They shouldn't be aware that they're seeing an addressable ad. It should be as though they're watching anything else.
And that's across VOD, it's across linear replacement, it's across all kind of touch points.
Yeah, ultimately.
And of course, another point is measurability, the report you can get after it, because you can have number of impressions, who was exposed, the interaction with the ad, so it's completely different from linear.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Good to have a nice alignment across all the panelists there.
Sorry for not being more controversial.
Yeah, I was hoping for a fight to break out. So now we've defined it. How successful is addressable TV, particularly at reducing waste and delivering return on investment for campaigns targeting not like the mass reach that you'll see on a typical linear TV buy, but more narrow niche segments? I'll probably put that to John first.
Yeah, so for me, addressable TV has a real place, especially as we see the decline in linear reach over the years. I think if you buy the same number of ratings as you did 5 years ago, you're going to see your reach decline very quickly, and all you're doing is increasing your frequency. So managing that frequency is where addressable TV has a real place. So if you decide, okay, the point at which I'm happy to sort of redeploy my budget into addressable is X, and I can make up the reach there. And there's some really nice addressable solutions where you can target light TV viewers or even unexposed TV viewers to really boost your reach of the campaign. There's a really nice use case for that when you're using that in conjunction with linear. But I mean, just using addressable on its own, obviously there's a clear use case there. If you've got a particularly niche product or a niche audience that you're trying to target, addressable solves that problem really nicely and gives the impression as though you're buying a full TV campaign, even though you're only addressing the people who are really in market for it. So you can be very smart with how you use it.
There is quite a lot of layers there, to be honest. So if you look at some of the solutions out there which aren't really being used properly, in totally honesty, you've got the likes of Samsung, LG, Samba, all ACR products, understanding how many times has an ad gone through that TV screen, and location-based as well. So you've got those ideas. Ultimately, you've got them to work together, but because they've also got different strands to it. There's also a massive panel that's been in existence for a long time in the UK, owned by Sky. So understanding how many times an ad has gone at more localities than has been seen from the likes of kind of the BARB measurements, which is limited to 15 regions. 15 regions isn't going to help you too much in that scenario. So if you've got a scenario where you can break down to, say, 124 postcode areas, or you've got even further than that, which definitely can be done, down to, say, 3,000 district levels, then you've got an ability to say, what's the natural delivery of my TV campaign linear-wise, and how could I then top up those regions that are underexposed by that main campaign? Because there is a very big discrepancy between that natural delivery. There's always kind of really big pockets of really heavy TV viewers around the country. So being able to identify that at lower levels and be able to top those regions up through a TV screen, regardless of that, as long as it's qualifying factors of being TV, quality, production values, all that sort of stuff, then actually there's some real big opportunities to do that. And that's something we've done with an agency in terms of using our ability to split the country into 3,000 regions, the content we have, which skews to a younger, lighter TV viewing audience as well, to really push that really hard in terms of kind of delivering further reach.
And is that mainly an opportunity for kind of big national TV buyers? Or
In terms of being able to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, but then there's two ways to look at it. That's like incremental reach on top of TV. But actually, if you were to approach this from I just want to run an addressable TV campaign, regardless of any sort of linear campaign going on whatsoever, then actually, yeah, you can do some really small level, locality-based TV planning. And you can do that on a kind of a conversion basis, and you can think about ROI on that side of it. Because by the end of the campaign, if you isolate certain areas, turn off certain areas versus other areas, then you can start to say, right, is there an uptick on that kind of conversions in that postcode area versus that one, or postcode district, because that's quite a big area if you go that way.
Yeah, I think for me as well, the thing that I don't think we're quite there yet with the technology would be to actually start to addressably serve our creative. So we can then be really, really creative with our creative. So, you know, if you know who your audience is, you can make sure you tailor the right ad to that particular audience. So, for example, you know, if you're a car manufacturer and you know it's a family, you'll serve them a big family car as opposed to someone who might be an environmentalist, and so you serve them an EV message. You know, you can be really smart with it then. It's not even that difficult. You know, you can see the use cases, but it's just making sure that you've got the budget to make all those different creative iterations, but also the data to make sure that you know that you're going to be serving it to the right people.
And what about addressable TV's ability to open up TV advertising to smaller advertisers and increase that addressable advertiser base? Mara, I know you've got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, for sure. When we talk about connected TV and addressable advertising, it's an opportunity for clients that they never approach TV, maybe for a budget issue, to invest on TV, because the average budget needed is much lower. It's also an opportunity for clients that are not maybe national-wide, so they was not using TV because they are active in specific areas, so now they can target by region and by territories. And also, back on is it incremental reach? Of course, you can work on incremental reach, so you can exclude people that were already exposed on linear advertising, but you can also target live TV viewers, you know, they were exposed but with less frequency to linear. And of course, we can work on frequency as well. So I think you can really play with addressable TV in many, many reasons.
And again, I want to bring it back to kind of the consumer aspect of it for Lisette. I know you've got some thoughts on this. So we have kind of addressable TV's ability to kind of personalize the advertising and deliver kind of more incremental reach for the brands. But what about the consumer? Like, can this technology be used to improve the consumer experience, and how important is that in the overall kind of scheme of things?
Yeah, thanks for feeding me that one. Yeah, I think relevance, ad relevance. There was a lot of discussion today and yesterday about attention, and if you're serving personalized ads and a personalized experience, I think you're going to get more engagement. There'll be more ad recall. There'll be more attention. And at the end of the day, we're advertising products and services, so we want the consumer to actually buy them. So when you have that ability to serve something that's personalized and that consumer can engage with it, you're definitely going to have a more successful, more productive, and more efficient and effective ad campaign. I'm not necessarily advocating for addressable all the time, but what Rich and John just said about the geo-targeting. Geo-targeting is great, especially for smaller advertisers who only have retail businesses in certain regions and they're new to TV, but they can't afford a big national campaign, nor is it relevant for their product or their services. So yeah, I think ad relevance in this instance is doing good for the consumer, and it's doing good for the advertiser in the end. So yeah.
And you mentioned effectiveness there, and that kind of brings me round, and I don't want to talk too much about it because we had an entire session earlier on, but how is kind of success effectively measured in the addressable TV environment? And this is for you, Ahmed. Like, what data specifically can we get from there, and how does that sit with kind of like the impact of GDPR and other kind of data privacy regulations that we're seeing across the world?
Well, data, in my opinion, is very scarce at the moment. I would say from a content and service provider, video service provider perspective, success is really, or the bigger overarching success is when we start to see budgets shifting from the giants, Facebook and Google, and moving towards the local video content and service providers. This is really the ultimate success. And to do that, of course, Google and Facebook, they offer a lot of data. And I would say success is when the advertiser is convinced that the data set that the service provider offers gives them what they need, because they've been spoiled by Google and Facebook, I would say.
Okay. What about data's role in optimizing TV campaigns, not just in terms of addressability, but also frequency and how that impacts reach? Kind of how is that kind of developing? And John, you mentioned earlier on, I'll come to you in a second, about kind of the role that universal IDs have in this environment.
Right, so universal IDs are too plenty at the moment, right? So there are several solutions in the market, and in the US there are, the topic is more, is a bit wider than Europe, Europe being a bit more conservative about GDPR and all of that. The several places that this could be done, and for me, from the video delivery perspective, as long as the content or the service provider has a universal ID that they're using, that propagates through the system until that reaches the advertiser, and this of course is different, from one country to another, then that's fine. The challenge is to get the video delivery system across all the devices, all the screens, all the types of content, live, video on demand, and DVR, to use the same measurement, the same targeting mechanism with the universal ID. It's great to know that we're moving towards that direction, because I believe in the targeting efficiency that this introduces, but what does that look like from a video delivery perspective, I think, is the next question to be asked.
Okay.
Just on that as well, I mean, I think it's all very well going down the ID route, and absolutely something we should absolutely 100% do, but problem is that the universal in that name is not universal a lot of the time, and there are lots of publishers that cannot work with them, and there are some publishers that do not want to work with them. Sorry, not publishers, platforms particularly. So, and one thing that I often, from my perspective and where we are as an agnostic platform ultimately, is that we don't necessarily have login data. We do have a lot of reach. And one thing that is, massively apparent from, finding common denominators between platforms doesn't feel like we as an industry have started to really nail that down. And the common denominator a lot of the time is geography, because, you know where your impressions landed or your impacts and so on like that. And most DSPs, most platforms, most publishers could report back at 3,000 regions in, say, the UK, Germany, say 8,000 regions. That's a hell of a lot more granularity than any TV has got to at this point. And I think a lot of the time we as an industry are trying to grapple with why connected TV isn't digital yet. It's not. It's definitely not that. The TV team are going, this is amazing. I can target by 3,000 regions. It's almost like both sides need to kind of find a moment of parity and build a base in the middle there. And then we can start attacking that ID thing. The ID thing absolutely should be solved. But if you don't kind of get to that moment of parity, the scaling of that right now is going to be quite small.
John, do you have anything to add on it?
So I think
Ahmed, you've got one?
Just to add on that as well, I mean, ID could be device, could be based on device, it could be based on the IP address. It could be based on the subscription or something else, or it could be based on the household. There are many types of IDs, and it's really, this is different from one market to another, and also different from one portion of the demand side to another. The decision how to do that is, I think, is crucial, and it's really a local flavor that different countries are taking different approaches to.
Okay, and in that sense, does that prohibit kind of that dream of like the cross-regional kind of reach? Is that a hurdle that we can overcome? Is it all about standardization around that?
We can hope for standardization, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. On this one, yes, of course, if there is an agreement in a certain geography or a certain country that these are the IDs that we're using, and by the way, we're starting to see directions or movements towards that direction. Of course, that should help to increase the demand and give confidence to the advertisers that, look, you can target across screen now, you can be more confident about your frequency and the targeting criteria that you're using. So in theory, that's the case. But what we've been hearing from many experts, and I think yesterday there was a lot of evidence of that, is that even when this happens, the advertiser is still not moving the budgets from Google and Facebook towards the video content and service providers. In my opinion, this is because we're still not giving them everything that they need. So yes, it could help. In theory, it does help, but we've done that in a couple of cases, but we didn't see the results that we were expecting.
Just in terms of, I think we'll probably all agree that universal ID is probably, if we can iron out the technicalities of how we do it, is the panacea that we need as an industry. But I think before you even get to that point, how do you make what you're already doing work as hard as possible so you're increasing reach rather than just driving incremental frequency? And there are ways in which you can deploy your linear to make it work as hard as possible before you start reaching the point of diminishing returns in your frequency. There's techniques where you can have a look at who you've already reached and who you haven't. Use that, your unexposed spying hit list moving forward, which is a nice technique that you can use. And again, we have fusions of data, again, with some of the Publicis Lift products that we've got, where we can start to have a look at in-market data sets, so you can optimize against that particular audience. So sometimes it throws out linear programming that you might not necessarily think works for your buying audience, because your route to market is ABC One adults or housewife children, house person's children, young adults, whatever it might be. But that's not necessarily who you're trying to target as the end product. And as soon as you start looking at that as the lens to who you're trying to reach, it will throw out different programming that you can use to enhance your reach versus the target. And once you've then saturated that, then you look outside of how you can then manage that reach in other channels. And that's where the universal IDs can come in and help solve that problem too.
And I think that just alludes to the fact that we are talking about a sliding scale, which I suppose are going back to at the start, is that you've got a scenario where TV is amazing and does a huge, incredible job of massive reach around quality environment, regulating and so on like that, but now has this ability to start kind of pushing itself down the funnel and start having those conversations a little bit further down, getting to that holy grail of the ID. Absolutely, we should try and get there. But just appreciate how far TV has come and how far video has come at this point.
Yeah. You mentioned moving down the funnel there with TV and video there, and that kind of brings up the topic of waste and how can we use data-driven approaches to TV and video advertising to kind of eliminate as much waste as possible. So I've got a bit of an open question here for the whole panel. And if anyone wants to take it on, feel free. But how much waste can we realistically eliminate in the next 2 years through data-driven approaches to TV advertising?
Can I wade in on this?
Versions of this.
No, not all waste is bad.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think Rich is probably thinking the same thing as I am. And I think for anybody that is representing any brands in the room, I apologise for what I'm about to say, but sometimes when we're briefed on the audience that a brand wants to target, it's not necessarily who is consuming their product. They have an aspiration that they might want to reach young people, but really who's buying their products are 45 pluses. And you get this disconnect. If we only look at buying the audience they've asked us or briefed us on, we're missing everybody that is actually buying their product. I mean, the example I've used before is extreme, but for example, if you've raised awareness of Saga Holidays once 1634s, that's no good because they can't take advantage of that because they're not 55 and over, right? So it's an extreme example, but it illustrates the point, right? So we need to make sure that we are targeting everybody initially, because anybody's a potential consumer, and that's where the value and the waste comes when you're buying linear TV. But you can obviously optimize that in the video space where you can start to really drill down. But again, I think brands need to be realistic about who is buying their product and where the opportunity lies, rather than having a very aspirational audience but might not actually be consuming their product. And that's especially true over the next few months and potentially years as we enter a cost of living crisis, because younger audiences are going to have less buying power than they do before. So I think that's just something to consider.
I agree with you, and actually I think talking about waste is a bit misleading because TV is a powerful media to reach big audiences and build brand awareness. So I wouldn't talk about waste. For sure, on top, the addressable TV can help to add to linear more precise messages to specific audiences. And then I think new solutions are also coming. For example, if you watch in Germany what is doing ProSieben, they just launched the programmatic TV, means it's not a one-to-one addressable message, it's a one-to-many solution to replace the linear spot with a programmatic ad serve. So I think is coming, means also the linear TV will adapt to the market. But again, for me, is useful to build brand awareness first.
I mean, the classic example is, you know, branding Pampers. Not everyone needs, you know, nappies right now, but in a couple of years' time, you never know, sort of thing. Yeah. So it's like, it's that kind of scenario where you need to build that kind of awareness of that brand, even if it's not something you need right now, and that is what TV is very good at. But optimization-wise, afterwards, we've got those tools now in a TV screen, so it's great.
Yeah, I guess there's the question of, is there actually waste in TV? Okay, so I can see we've got about 5 minutes left, but I just wanted to move a step back. So we focus on TV, video, AVOD, FAST, but I started this session by kind of showing a bit of our data around kind of the size of the overall advertising landscape. And obviously now we're getting this data-driven approach to advertising. We're also seeing kind of the ability to kind of create campaigns that don't just cross different TV and video ecosystems, but also cross into other areas of media, like radio, digital audio. And Mara, I know you fulfill this. You sell across a variety of media. So I wanted to ask you, how can we kind of make this data-driven approach that we're seeing in the TV and video space, how can that be applied to kind of the rest of media for advertisers seeking cross-media campaigns?
Yeah, so all traditional media are becoming digital and doing this big transition. So what is possible for TV in addressability is also possible for radio, for digital out of home. So the market is going there. What we are working on is we think TV is a powerful media and can have different companion on the strategy based on what is the goal of the client. So for example, we know that TV plus radio can work very well in both reach and frequency goals. We know that TV plus digital can be very powerful for young audiences, or for example, TV plus digital out of home works very well if you want to work on verticals like fashion or finance or specific verticals. So I think it's really based on the brief we receive from the clients. We also built some internal tools, pre-evaluation tools that in Italy we recently launched. It's called One Flight. It's an opportunity to help the client decide if a campaign can be TV only, TV plus radio, TV plus digital, so really showing how the plan and the result will change based on the media included in the brief. I think in terms of also reporting and measurements, lots of things are ongoing. There is not only what GIC are going on a market by market basis, but there is also what broadcasters, sales houses are trying to give agencies and clients to measure everything. So there is opportunity to measure what is happening in store or online thanks to proximity solutions. There is opportunity for post-evaluation campaigns. So I think tools now are helping clients to invest cross-media.
And what about on the agency side, John? Like how are things adapting there to kind of fulfill these kind of cross-media campaigns? And is there a significant amount of demand for those kind of campaigns among your clients? Well,
I mean, agencies have been planning cross-media campaigns since the dawn of agencies' existence, and you know, it's our expertise that clients are paying for to understand how we should be planning cross-media. And so a good comms planner that's worth their salt should know what works best. But that job is made more complicated the more new platforms are introduced, which seems to be on a daily basis almost. And again, I come back to sort of what I started saying. It's very hard to know how effective all these are without unified measurement. And so what we're having to do is create proxies and use other ways in which to evaluate that. I mean, the best way of knowing is clients that have really good, solid MMM studies that we can then use off the back of and have a look at the multipliers and see how all the media work together. There's great industry body work that's done, the likes of ThinkBox, RayJar, you name it. They do some really nice studies that have a look to see ROIs, ROIs in combination with other media channels, halo effects. All of that work is all ingested by the agency to realise what is the right way to answer this particular brief. And effectiveness planning being such a big thing at the moment as well. All of that is coming together in terms of the agency's response of the best way to actually fuse everything from a cross-media point of view. The one thing I would say, though, is that a good cross-media plan is one that is substantiated with a good budget. If you try and spread yourself too thin with a small budget, your cross-media plan isn't really going to touch the sides. You're better off saturating a channel before you move into the next one. And I think that's, for me, a key learning, because if you try and just do everything, you're not going to do anything very well.
Okay, I can see that we're running low on time. We've got about a minute left. So I wanted to end with kind of like a big picture question, and I'll go across the whole panel. Short answers, please, if possible. But in a few words, what do you think will be the most important thing for maximising reach in an increasingly addressable world over the next 2 years? I'll start with you, Rich.
I think it's ultimately following the viewer. The viewer tells us. You can look at any report out there, from Ofcom to Barb to any sort of neutral report, and you will see that they are shifting their viewing onto various screens and various platforms, and ultimately that's where the job of the advertiser or the publisher is. Be there.
John?
Yeah, it's got to be industry collaboration, so we can start to map that journey out as well.
Okay. Mara?
For me, will be also connected TV penetration, so how fast we'll go. That for sure will influence the capability to do addressability, collaboration as well. I think partnership between premium broadcaster and give clients the opportunity to buy from a central point would be key as well.
Well, to underpin what Rich said and John said, I think collaboration and following the viewer requires collaboration in the area of data, and I think we can all agree that we're far, far away from being able to assess, but we do have great measuring tools, we do have good targeting tools, and right now we're making the best of what we have, but I think there's a lot of work to be done there to be effective and efficient.
Ahmed?
More versatile ad delivery solutions and more data collection and activation.
Perfect. Okay, well, thanks everyone for sticking till the end. I know this was in between you and some drinks, so really good. Fantastic panel. Just could everyone please join me in applauding the fantastic panel?